within the confines of our government, it's no secret that historically it's always intervened in other countries, essentially since the inception of the government, of the United States government. And that's, it's almost undebatable. The thing is, though, methodology has changed significantly, and over the past 25 years, one particular agency has been utilized more than others in order to utilize subversive methods of financing various so-called democracy-oriented groups in order to get across American-style democracy in various countries. And even the most insidious point of this, I guess part of this operation, is the fact that it classifies itself as a non-profit organization, but it's almost entirely public funded by United States tax dollars, and it was created by an act of Congress. And we're talking about the National Endowment for Democracy, created about 25 years ago by the Reagan administration. One of the founders of the National Endowment for Democracy, one of the people who wrote the legislation, Alan Weinstein, noted that what the NED did was essentially what the CIA did covertly 25 years before. He said that in an interview in 1991 with the Washington Post. Essentially, in the late 1970s, a lot of people had grown, tired of CIA intervention in other countries and had heard all of the horror stories of torture and the various despotic regimes that the CIA had helped prop up in places like Zaire, Iran, Chile, etc. We could go on, but YouTube has like a 10-minute limit, so we're going to keep this short. But suffice to say, you could pretty much throw a dart at the so-called third world and you could find American involvement somehow, some way, essentially by the CIA. But the American public was pretty tired of it by the late 70s, and things like the Church Committee had been investigating, and they had grown very, very tired of the CIA as well, because the CIA was kind of, I guess, arrogant about not disclosing things they should have disclosed, etc. So various limitations were enacted, but as I said in the beginning, historically we always want to intervene in foreign governments for what's called the national interest, which usually means corporate and business interest. So they had to come up with another way to do the things that the CIA had been doing, so they created the National Endowment for Democracy. And it essentially functions by taking the money that's given to it by Congress when it funds the State Department. It's part of the U.S. aid funding. It functions by distributing grants, half of which are distributed to four primary organizations: the International Republican Institute, which is just how it sounds. It's the International Institute for the Republican Party. The the International Labor Solidarity Center, which I'm going to call the Solidarity Center from henceforth. It's ran by the AFL-CIO. It's and they give money to the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, which again is a wing or an establishment within the Democratic Party here, and also the Center for International Private Enterprise. Now, in 1984, the NED was financing a very shady government official for election in Panama. So there is a law that says that the NED can't directly fund, and these grants that they issue can't directly fund any political party or candidate. But what they do is they donate a lot of what's called soft money to various civic groups that then usually form a confederation that make up a political party. And the NED gives money, technical expertise, training, and a variety of equipment from newsprint to automobiles to select labor unions, dissident student groups, and indie media in countries that they perceive to be under the threat of having democracy revoked, or not, or are in the actual process of not having democracy. These groups tend to be right wing. They tend to be pro free markets and pro foreign investment. And essentially what this amounts to is the NED by putting, hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants to various small groups throughout the so-called third world, the global south, what have you, they're able to co-opt social movements. They're able to build social movements by, essentially by fraud, by putting a lot of foreign money into what is prima facie, looks like a, grassroots organization. And by putting all this money in there, they give these so-called grassroots organizations astroturf organizations, as they're sometimes referred to because of their fakeness. By putting that money in there, this can make huge, I mean gigantic amounts of difference in countries where the threshold for the standards of living aren't so high. Now, people in favor of the NED claim that a private organization is necessary to overcome the constraints of a government agency, because it's not, it can't be looked at as strictly. The oversight is a little more lax. Ron Paul, actually, one of the few things that Ron Paul and I agree on, actually, he said that there was no way for Congress to really, deal with the NED. Although I don't think that's entirely true, but it is more difficult. But I think these constraints they want to overcome is they want things to look like they are being privately funded and privately produced, when in actuality, since the money comes directly from the State Department, they're actually an instrument of the United States government, and they're paid for with United States tax dollars. And they want, so like I said, they want somebody to overcome those constraints, but they want the American taxpayer to pay for it. Well, it's and again, and I'll give you a number. In 2004, the NED got $80.1 million. $79.25 million came from the federal government. And what they've done, essentially, and I'm going to go into a few, examples across the globe. Again, the idea is twofold. You either win the election, you get a candidate going, you build a lot of grassroots movements, because again, you can't contribute money directly to, let's say the Confederation Party or what have you. You can't give money directly to them, but say there are groups within their trade unions. That's where the Solidarity Center comes in. You give money to these trade unions, student groups, civic associations, etc., that make up that political party, so that the money gets used for the political party and to finance the candidate indirectly. They've been involved in a lot of shady coup type events, especially in Venezuela, and I'm going to talk about that. And another thing that they utilize is like polls. In Venezuela, they did this very effectively, and apparently in the Eastern Europe, Ukrainian elections, they use this very well too. They use polls. Polling firms like Penn, Shawn, and Berland, who were utilized in, were utilized in the Ukraine and Venezuela to shape perceptions, either that the group the NED put into power has a lot of support, or that to give the impression that elections that empower elements and candidates that have the contrary positions to U.S. interests are actually fraudulent and they don't have any democratic support. For instance, after the 2002 recall referendum in Venezuela, they and it was not very close at all. The NED funded organizations, which I'll talk about them in particular in a moment, they used this what is this, Penn, Shawn, and Berland's exit poll. I keep forgetting the name. It's like Huey, Dewey, and Louie. It's not as simple as that. I wish it was. Maybe I should just call them that from now on. But they used their exit poll to claim the election was a fraud, despite the fact that 5 other exit polls showed that the election was, straight up legitimate, and also that the Organization of American States and the Carter Center both certified that election. That's the referendum election in 2002, which was brought about, primarily by NED-funded organizations. And I want to get more into detail in Venezuela, what they did in Venezuela, and how they affected the coup that, would transpire also in 2002. And I'll also get into other nefarious activities they've engaged in across the global South in part 2.